Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm ready. I just got done with a governor's press conference, and so I hustled up here. I'm glad I made it in time. So I'm looking forward to visiting with you people. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know what you think. But to start out with, I want to talk a little bit about a preview of this next legislative session. Just so you know that I'm going to talk about prairie dog legislation. And one of the things that we did last session that I think was critical for us out in the West was to make sure we took that sunset clause off of our funding that came back to the oil counties and cities and schools and townships. And that was important because that was our in lieu of property tax. I can guarantee you with the tight times we're having at the state level now, there would be a temptation by some legislators from other parts of the state to go and take some of that money and bring it back to the state. So that was huge that we had that clause. If we got nothing else done, that was a big thing. And so for the 9 major oil counties, you're going to have less revenue, but at least you're going to get your share. There's less activity. There's nothing we can do about the world global situation when it comes to oil, but we at least have we're going to have something to move forward with. I know that some communities have debt because they had to invest in infrastructure because of the oil impact. And we'll get through that, and we'll be monitoring those things. And we are looking at, and I'm going to talk about it later, a bonding proposal that will help some of you. Not everybody, but it'll help some of you get through these things. I think it'll go to the people that need it. Now, for the 8 minor oil counties, you were a part of the prairie dog funding that came back. That the non-oils got. You're getting some funding from oil and you're getting some from the prairie dog bucket. Now, the sad thing is that is not going to fill. It's not. We just don't have, it's a priority, it's down the list, it's not going to fill. But the thing that I would like to say is that we are looking at trying to find a way to get some infrastructure money to you, because I know you have needs. And even though that our revenues are down, there's still a need. You got to get these things done. We still got to do commerce in our state. I will talk a little bit about that when I get to the bonding part. So what's the big thing for the state? It's going to be the general fund. We need to make sure that we take care of the state. And you're probably saying, well, you guys, we don't worry about you, but you should, because if we aren't strong, then it's going to be tough to help political subs in the future. Just so you know, the biggest issue will be the oil revenue that is used in the general fund from the SIF. And that last time was $764 million. And I want to point out that people always said, hey, how come we aren't going to have a special session to take care of the funding shortfall? Well, we've been very fortunate to be able to have it cash going into the biennium. So that $764 million that was in the budget, that was a transfer from SIF, was earned last biennium. And we also had the $200 million that's used for county social services, also was from last biennium. So that's 964. That's almost $1 billion that we had in cash before the biennium started. Therefore, what has happened in this biennium, it's not a problem. We were able to stay above forecast. We were 151 million over forecast when we went into March 1. Well, it dropped down, and we're right now, we're probably around 180 to 190 million over forecast. Our economy came back enough, so we had enough sales tax revenue to stay even. We have not had to worry about calling a special session and making cuts. And we do have a plan in place so that if we did have some shortfalls, the governor would be able to do it. We have a formula that the legislature has put forward so that the governor can do it in a systematic way. And it's cuts, and it's using the budget stabilization fund, which I'm going to visit a little bit about with you in a few minutes. But as we talk about this shortfall, it's going to be real. We're going to have a hole to fill. We're looking at probably about $800 million hole that the state is going to have to deal with. And you might say, well, how did you get in that position? Well, first of all, I would like to remind you that the state has been very benevolent. We may be not Santa Claus, but we've been very benevolent. If you go back to the 2013 session, I want to remind you that we took 115 mills off of the tax rolls permanently from the school districts, and the state takes care of it. Now that's about a 1.17 billion. That's 1.1, almost 1.2 billion dollars that the state pays in place of local property taxpayers that would have been paying it if we hadn't have made that move at that time. Why did we make it? Because at that time, I mean, revenues were going high, and we wanted to make sure that we were sharing it with the people. But the thing you need to remember as we go forward, we at the state are going to keep our commitment. We're not going to send that back to the property taxpayers. We're going to find a way to get it done. And I'll talk about what things we're going to have to do in just a minute. I want to also remind you of the 20 mills for county social services that were taken away from the local property taxpayer. And when you put them together, that's 135 mills. It is it's over 1.3 billion in dollars in our general fund. That is 28% of the state's general fund. Now remember, the general fund is a 2-year budget. So when I talk about these numbers, our budget for this biennium is 4.8 billion. That's what it is. But that's a biennial number. You got to cut it in half, and it would be about 2.4 billion per year. But out of that 4.48 billion, 1.35 billion goes back to the political subs, school districts, and county social services. But the big thing is we've taken it off of the backs of the property tax, 28%. I do get a little upset when people say, oh, you're growing government. No, we're not growing government. We're making sure that the people are getting the services back there, and we've taken this obligation away from the local property taxpayer. I'm not done. Don't forget income tax relief to the individuals. Because our revenues were going up, and we felt we needed to share some of that with the taxpayers of North Dakota. People forget about it. 2009, 12% cut. 2011, another 12% cut in the income tax. 2013, another one. 2015, another one. So that was 12% to each biennium. It equals 48%. We cut income tax, individual income tax in North Dakota, 48%. People don't want to believe it, but we did. Now, when we did that last one in 2015, we were kind of sorry about it afterwards because we had a shortfall that biennium, and we had to get through that, and we did. We were very fortunate that during the 17-19 biennium, we were able to get this revenue back. It was a miracle, and we filled our budget stabilization fund, which we had depleted during the 15-17. All right, so we got an $800 billion hole the state has to fill. How are we going to do it? You're going to say, well, how are you going to do that? That's a lot of money. Well, number one, we're going to have to do probably trim budgets about 5%. That will get us 240 million, approximately. 240 million trimming budgets. We should have an ending fund balance of around 100 million. Yes, even with the things going on the way they are, we are tracking to come in around 100 million over forecast. Now remember, why can we be over forecast? Because we had that cash out of the SIF fund, that oil money that came into the general fund budget. That was the big elephant in the room that pushed that. Now, the legacy fund, I'm putting down about 200 million there that will be available that we'll have to use. Now, just so you know, everybody's talking about the legacy this, the legacy that. We're not, how come we don't get some use of the legacy fund in this state? Well, I want you to know that the 15-17 session, at the end of that, was the first time we could spend legacy earnings. We needed every cent. We needed every cent to get through that particular biennium and in 17-19. As it turned out, we ended up having earnings, actual earnings now, actual earnings of 455 million. That really got us going and got us to fill our budget stabilization, got us back so we were healthy again. So now we come back and we have another shortfall. Well, then we have that budget stabilization fund. We bumped it up from 9% of our budget to 15, which was a good move. And that has 726 million in it. You know, we're criticized of, oh, you got money stored here and you got money stored over there. Now we need it. Now we're going to get through it. And so I figure we'll probably take another 300 million out of that 726 in order to get this thing balanced up. Now that's an estimate at this time. So that gets us 840 million, to a little more than we probably need for the 800. And so as we go forward, the thing that I want to point out to you, because we've managed this money, we are not going to have to raise taxes. We do not need to raise taxes because we have the legacy fund earnings, because we've got the budget stabilization filled. That's good. So that will be one of the top issues in the session. And for those of you in oil country, we're not going to be looking at robbing money from the political subs out there to subsidize the state or raising your property taxes. Next, I'd like to just quickly talk about the a possible bonding proposal. We are looking at a bonding proposal, and it would be because of three things. One, the pandemic. We've got we've got communities that are struggling a little bit because of the pandemic. We have people that need infrastructure. Whether there was a pandemic or not, we still had infrastructure that needs to be addressed. And that's across the state of North Dakota. That is not just out west, that's everybody. Remember, we got to think about the whole state too. And then we do have some legacy earnings. And we would, through this proposal, we would be putting these earnings to work for the people. And here's what we are looking at doing, and that is doing a bond to capitalize some areas. And I'm not going to go into the areas today because we're still working on them. I've got them sitting over here. I've got my ideas. We've talked to people, and we'll be talking to more people. We want to get input. We want to get people to support this legislation. But why would we be bonding? Some of you are saying, why would the state bond when we have a deficit of 800 million in the hole? Number one, the interest rates to service the bonds are less than 2%. It's about 1.6%. So we've got low rates. The other thing, we have a dedicated stream. We would use some of the legacy earnings going forward as a sinking and interest fund to service those bonds. So we have that. And the other thing I want to remind you, we don't have to do it, but inflation is probably close to 3%. So when you put the inflation and you don't do it, the inflation will kill you versus 1.6%. So if we've got a dedicated stream to take care of them, I think we need to look at them. These would not be general fund obligation bonds. They would be obligated to the legacy earnings. Now, we will be working on that. There's a lot of water in there, and you might say out west, well, we've got our water. Well, I'll tell you what, we still have needs out there. We still need expansion. And I will tell you that we want to get, there's 3 big projects out of the Resources Trust Fund, but for a while anyway, so that these other projects can be taken care of. And what are the big 3? I will give you that. Mouse River Flood Control, Red River Valley Water Supply, and the Fargo Diversion. They are taking all of the money out of the Resources Trust Fund. And keep in mind, that is oil money. That's 20.5%, or it's a 20.5% of the oil extraction tax goes to fund water projects in the state of North Dakota. That's all across the state. So we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to get their projects done. So that is one of the areas that would be in the bonding, so that they can move forward and not take all the money away from the other projects in the Resources Trust Fund. All right. The other thing I would like to point out is that we will be working on the Legacy Fund. We were in Watford City, and we took input on how we should do the Legacy Fund earnings, and it would be the framework. And for example, what are the areas that we're going to spend our earnings on? And they would change. But I will give you a couple of things. One, I'm one that would like to see some of the money go into the Highway Trust Fund. Why do I want it to go into the Highway Trust Fund? Because the state gets money, the county gets money, the city gets money, the townships get money, and transit gets money. So it's spread out. And the other thing that I like about it is that we don't need to raise the fuel tax. Now, there are some other thoughts. They'd rather raise the fuel tax than do this. What's the opposition to putting that in? They're saying, well, that's going to be a permanent appropriation out of the legacy. We don't want that. Well, I think that over time, there's going to be enough money coming into the earnings of the legacy fund that there will be plenty for other things. And of course, we're looking at infrastructure things that need to be taken care of going forward for cities and counties. We want to make sure they're taken care of. Low interest revolving loan funds. We're talking about especially schools. Schools need to have a fund where they can go and get some low interest money in order to maybe IT updates. It could be construction, all that type of thing. We do have a school construction fund right now, a low interest revolving loan, but all the money is obligated. So we could put a lot more into that to help our K through 12. One of the things that's come up out in the West, because there are needs for building schools, and people are saying, well, you're sitting on all that money, state should build them. The state has never built schools. That has always been a local obligation. We can help with the low interest revolving loan, but I think that if the state gets into building schools, we're opening up a can of worms. There'd be people wanting schools or new buildings, new facilities, and they have no skin in the game, and so they wouldn't care. So, and I suppose if we did, we would only do a partial. We would maybe just say, okay, we can help you with 10% or 15%, but we're not going to pick up the full tab. And that's a possibility too going forward. Another area that we do need to deal with in the state of North Dakota, whether you like it or not, and that's behavioral health. We need to put some money into that. And when I say put money into behavioral health, let's talk about education first. You know, I really get upset, and I went off on when we had our Western caucus in Watford City. I got going on, you have these classrooms and you have a child that misbehaves. You have behavioral tantrum in the classroom. They have all the students leave until they get that student cool down. And I'm saying that's not right. That student should be taken to a place where they are professionally get help. But think of all those other students. They're out of the classroom. They're losing classroom time. If I'm a parent of that, I'm going to be upset. I would think that we could get sued because the school districts could get sued because they're not taking care of the educational needs of the good kids. And I shouldn't say that. When I say that, I better be careful, because even children with behavioral health are good kids. They just have issues. It may come from at home or whatever it may be, but they need help. And we have a thing called day treatments, and there's other things out there in which we can get some help to these kids and help them get going back into life. The sooner we get it done, the better, because now they become adults and we deal with it at the adult level. Either we just let them run around and everybody says, well, I don't know about so-and-so, that they're kind of wacky and they do this and they do strange things, and we don't know what to do with them. Well, let's get to these issues early so that as these people get older, we have some treatment for them. I do think we need to address behavioral health, addiction. I'm not afraid to put more money into our drug task force out here in the state, trying to keep drugs out, but also treating people that have addiction problems and getting them back into society, getting them back into the workforce. So those are some things that we will be working on. There's a host of other issues that are going to come up, and I'm going to tell you right now, there's going to be a big debate over the governor's executive orders. Some of them I think were right on. Some of them I think he pushed the envelope a little bit. But we're going to be looking at the governor's ability to do those, and they will be debated along with a lot of the other things that have come up with this pandemic. Keep in mind, we just got done with that governor's conference, a press conference downstairs. We were talking about the CARES Act money. That was $1.25 billion that the feds brought to the state of North Dakota. And of course, it went through the Emergency Commission, which is made up of 6 people, which would be myself, Leader Pollard, and the Secretary of State, and the governor, and then of course the appropriations chairs. It was Jeff Delzer and Ray Holmberg. That's the Emergency Commission. And we decide, we put our blessing on them, and then it goes to the budget section, which is made up of all of the appropriators and leaders. That's a large group. And if it's okayed by those 2 groups, then it goes. And there are many in I shouldn't say many, there are those in the legislature that feel we should have had a special session. There's no reason that, as some people call it, 6 old white guys are making the decision. Well, we're looking out for the best of the people too. I'm not worried about white guys getting all the benefit. I want everybody. I want kids, women, and people of minority. It doesn't matter. We want our citizens to benefit from this. So that debate goes on, and that debate will end up in the legislature about if this ever happens again, should the legislature come into session and the legislature appropriate that money. Now, all I can tell you is that we did have guidelines. There were 3 guidelines. You had to stay within those. And so I think we did a pretty good job. We listened to other people. Legislators were brought in to advise the governor, staff on where money should go, and so there was input. It wasn't like it was done in a vacuum and the governor and his staff did it all. They didn't. It was there was other people that had input on it. So there's going to be some contentious things there. Up until now, the federal dollars that would come to the state were not very much. So nobody cared that we did it. Well, then when this much came, then there was a difference. People had a difference of opinion. So as a result, those are some things that we are going to be dealing with. And I can guarantee you it may get a little hot and heavy down here. But you know what the good thing is? We have all of our rooms, our committee rooms videoed. Trudy, you will be able to sit on your couch, Trudy, and watch us, and we will be transparent, and we will get away with nothing, and you're going to get us. And so I just want you to be aware that it's going to be a new day, and every committee will be videoed conference. You'll be able to watch the hearings. Then when the bill goes to the floor, you'll be able to watch it on the floor. It's going to be great for the citizens of North Dakota. So thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Brent?
Mute us and I'll ask you one. Senator Wardner, there are going to be undoubtedly a lot of energy issues this coming session. There'll probably be a discussion about royalty deductions and probably about Coal Creek Station, and maybe pore space will come up again. It's going to be a busy session. I don't need you to go into those things, but I don't want folks to think that there aren't going to be some major energy topics coming up in 2021.
No, you're exactly right. You'd have had to give me at least an hour if I have to talk about pore space and royalty issues. I'm going to tell you that those will definitely be on the table. It's going to, yeah, especially you people out in the oil country, you're probably going to be tuning every day. Instead of watching Days of Our Life, you're going to be watching the legislature make sausage. So.
We will hear a little bit more about those issues after lunch in the afternoon session. We've got John Weeda and Lynn Helms coming up this afternoon yet. And Brent's going to tell us a little bit about where oil money is spent around the state as well.
Good. He knows it. And that's just a comment on that. A lot of people in the eastern part of the state have no idea the amount of oil money that goes into the schools, into the water infrastructure. And there are other areas that they're getting it, and they don't realize it. So it's good that he does that. And yes, Linda, how do you give testimony? Well, it looks like this particular, good question, by the way, from Linda Swyhovic. And here's what you're going to have to do. If you want to testify, you're going to have to get your testimony in before the committee, and it will be digitized and it will be put up on the screen, and you can speak from at home, but you're going to have to make sure that it gets in ahead of time. It's going to be different that way, and we will be getting guidelines out where you can send it. And the committee chair, if you have to testify and you're going to be distanced, you're going to have to let the chairman of the committee know that you're in the queue. You're in the queue, and it'll work. We think it's going to work pretty good. But one of the things that the committee chairs are going to have to do, they're going to probably have to go out at least 2 weeks so that people know when there's certain hearings are going to come up.